Russians have sacrificed a lot and they've mobilized, and this will end on Russia's terms. The only negotiation will resemble that which took place in Tokyo Bay in September 1945, when the Japanese had to stand before a table with the American conquerors and sign the terms dictated by the United States. Russia will dictate terms. So it's up to Russia what Russia wants out of this. I, you know, I can't sit here and say with full confidence what I know what Russia says it wants. It wants demilitarization. That means that all NATO influence is eliminated from the Ukrainian military. Since the Ukrainian military is a de facto proxy of NATO today, it means the total destruction of the Ukrainian military.
Yeah.
So either Russia is going to kill them all, and Russia is prepared to do so now. There's no more soft glove approach. The Russians are in the business of killing Ukrainians, and business is good. They're slaughtering them on the front, and they're going to kill them more. 10 to 15 divisions are showing up very soon. Ukraine's got nothing to respond. Russia is taking out at will. Russia can attack Ukraine top to bottom, left to right at will. There is no air defense system in Ukraine worthy of the name. It's, they shoot down one or two missiles, everything else gets hit, and Russia can do whatever it wants in Ukraine right now in terms of taking out critical infrastructure. The key here for Russia is how to manage, because let me put this too. Europe and the United States sought to impose massive sanctions on Russia.
Mm-hmm.
Sanctions that weren't designed to hurt Vladimir Putin and the oligarchs and all that. Yes, they were. Sanctions designed to hurt the Russian people, to starve the Russian people, to have their livelihoods eliminated through economic collapse, to bring about domestic calamity in Russia. So if you're a Russian citizen, you need to wake up to this reality that the West is not this warm and fuzzy thing. It is a brutal, thuggish entity that sought to bring harm to you, to deny your ability to raise your children, deny your ability to have a job, deny your ability to have health care, pension, everything. They wanted to crush Russia. So beware the West, because soon the only hope you have is Russian goodwill, because your economy is going down. It's collapsing, not because of anything Russia did, because of what you did, what we did in seeking to isolate Russia, sanction Russia. It has failed. Russia has emerged with a very solid economy while Europe is suffering, and Europe's going to suffer egregiously. So Russia is going to play whatever cards they can, up to and including, because there's a reason behind the madness. It's not just about taking out electric power grids to curtail the movement of military forces and command and control. This is about destroying a nation. Russia isn't in the business of saving Ukraine anymore. Russia's in the business of destroying Ukraine, and in the process, bringing harm to Europe. Russia will, I believe, generate an economic emergency, humanitarian emergency in Ukraine that requires millions of people to flee for their lives. If they stay in their frozen cities, they will die. There will be no food, no water, no electricity, no healthcare, nothing. This is a tragedy, but the West brought it on themselves. And now millions of people are going to flee to the West, and the West is going to have to deal with that problem. Yeah. And suddenly, when this is all said and done, not only will the Russians have destroyed the Ukrainian military, there's also denazification, by the way, which everybody poo-poos in the West. There is a Nazi problem in Ukraine. There won't be when Russia finishes. That is pretty much a guarantee. If you don't understand Russia and how much they hate Nazi ideology and how sickened they are that it has reborn itself rebirthed itself in Ukraine under Western protection. If you think that Stepan Bandera Avenue is still going to be Stepan Bandera Avenue when this is done, if you think there's going to be monuments to Stepan Bandera in Lvov in Western Ukraine, you don't know Russia. Russia will denazify Ukraine, and the cost of that denazification will be horrific. The gloves are off. Russia's not committing war crimes. Everybody's going, this is a war crime. Really? Take a look at what the United States did to Iraq in 1991. I was a part of that. We took out their infrastructure. We took out their electric. We took out their water. We took out because it's all dual use. Look what we did to Serbia. We shut the lights out in Serbia in 1999. NATO did. Russia's just doing it better. They're doing it bigger. And it should scare the hell out of the West. Yeah. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that word on radio, so I apologize. It should scare the heck out of Europe, because I think Europe needs to wake up that they're, for the grace of God, go us. Meaning, you want to fight with Russia. This is what war is about, ladies and gentlemen. Europe forgot that. Europe forgot what it's like to have cities torn apart, populations dislocated, death and suffering on a large scale, economies malfunctioning. Welcome to war, Europe. You wanted it, you got it, you pay the price, and ain't no Russian shedding a tear for you. But you know what the sad thing is? Russians are crying for them, because Russians are good people. Russians are upset about this. This is ripping Russia's soul apart because they're not the evil, robotic, automaton, Mordor, orc nation that they've been told. This is a nation of deep culture, deep religion. Religion. These people are religious and they take their religion seriously and they believe in doing good to fellow humans. They don't want to be doing what's happening right now. This war is ripping them apart. But as I said when we at the break, I'm attracted to Rick Atkinson's trilogy where he talked about the transition of the American draft military from isolationist depression area men who wanted to be at home with their families. Wow. They didn't go to war. They didn't believe in this war. And the transition from that into this army of killers, not rapists and murderers, killers who realize the only way you're going home is by killing the Nazis in front of you and kill them without mercy, slaughter them. And I think the Russian army right now, they've got 300,000 guys mobilized who don't want to go to war. They don't want to go to war. But they are, and they recognize that the quickest path home is by killing every Ukrainian soldier in front of them, slaughtering them. Now, if they put up their hands, they're not going to murder them like the Ukrainians murdered Russian soldiers. They're going to take them prisoner. And they've proven that. Tens of thousands of Ukrainians have been taken prisoner, and then they're returned. They have medical care and all this kind of stuff. But this war is going to get ugly, ugly, ugly. And Europe is to blame. America is to blame. This is not Russia's fault. Just because Russia has been compelled to behave in this manner, don't blame Russia. They didn't want this. They didn't want to do this. They sought to avoid this. They were pushed and they had no choice.
How would the media spin all of that when we have to face reality, when we have to face the fact that it is not going the way as is portrayed by the media today?
Well, the media, let's start with the media first of all. The media doesn't exist as legitimate journalism anymore. They're purely a propaganda arm of their respective, national security establishments. And we know this. NBC News has admitted it. The National Security Advisor of the United States brags about how they have declassified intelligence that they know is wrong. They know it's wrong, but they're going to release it selectively to the media to shape perception. So it's all about information warfare. It's all about propaganda. There's no truth. Now, there used to be a time when a journalist would say, no, I'm going to ask a follow-up question to you because I know you're lying. I need the answer. And then the story would be the lie and the cover-up and all this. But the media is now going, okay, you want us to do that? We'll write it down and then print whatever you want us to print for that purpose. So, what are we asking the media to do? To show principle? There is no journalist worthy of the name. Journalism doesn't exist anymore in America. Not in the mainstream. They're not journalists. They're professional stenographers. So they have no shame. Let's look at Afghanistan. People have forgotten about Afghanistan. It was barely a year and a half ago that NATO and the United States got humiliated in Afghanistan. In the lead up to that, the media published any story they want. You remember the Russian bounties? Mm-hmm. Russians are paying the Taliban to kill Americans. Never did. Never going to happen. Never. But they published it. They ran with it. And then we had the thing. We will never leave Afghanistan. We will stay here as long as it takes for the evil scourge of Al-Qaeda to be. Suddenly we're out of Afghanistan. And how did we leave? America left with its tail between its legs. The humiliation of the Kabul airport was, just for an American to watch that unroll, it was one of the saddest moments, not only for the tragedy of the Afghan people whom we had lied to for 20 years, and we abandoned them now because we abandoned everybody. Europe, that's a big hint. We will abandon you. We are abandoning you. You're not our friends. But what did we do to NATO? We didn't even coordinate with NATO. It was like, hey, we're gone. You guys got to figure out how to get out yourself. NATO now had bought into this whole thing about post 9/11 Afghanistan, national reconstruction, supporting the war on terror. Now they had to flee after spending billions of their own dollars, thousands of lives, wounded and dead. And now they went back without even so much as a, oh, hey, we're sorry from America. And now America's led them down the same path in Ukraine. The media will do whatever the governments tell them to do. And the governments will, let me put it this way, neither Europe nor the United States is going to go to war in Ukraine against Russia. I mean, they're doing everything short of war, but there will be no NATO conflict in Ukraine because they know what the consequences will be. Ultimately, as I said, this war ends with the Russians dictating the terms of surrender to Ukraine, period. And the United States and NATO are going to have to accept it. Now, they'll spin it. They'll pull back. They'll draw a line, and then they're going to spin it any way they want. And the media will spin it, 400 ways from Sunday, how this was this, that, and the other thing. But at the end of the day, Russia's going to win this war, and the West is going to have to deal with it. All this talk about a diplomatic off-ramp right now, I love it when, General Mike, we have to give the Russians a diplomatic off-ramp. They don't want one. They wanted one back in April. Yep. You shut the door. Russia's not in the diplomatic off-ramp game right now. Russia's in, we're going to win this war game. All the dialogue about a diplomatic negotiation is an internal dialogue in the West. It's a conversation they're having with themselves. They're not having it with the Russians because the Russians, let's just talk about burn rates and replenishment rates. Those are just two things that's all you need to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Ukrainian replenishment rate, right now they got about 20,000 troops in the pipeline, the NATO training pipeline, but there's not enough equipment for those 20,000. Why? Because they had 80,000 troops arrive this summer that were equipped by NATO, but they burned all through them. So their burn rate is much greater than their replenishment rate. So they're getting weaker by the day. Russia, on the other hand, made a decision to withdraw from Kherson in Kharkiv. Why? They didn't want to lose guys that fighting for a piece of dirt. Their burn rate is very low. Their replenishment rate, as I said, 220,000 dudes showing up next month. Their replenishment rate is massive, very low burn rate. And you look at those two, force generating potentials, it's all Russia, all day, all night, all week, all month, all year. NATO doesn't have anything to give because they've given everything. And NATO never went into wartime defense production. It turns out, apparently, for NATO, they didn't realize this, but modern war against Russia requires a lot of artillery. And, the United States had an annual production capacity, I think, of 250,000 artillery shells, 225,000, give or take. But when you're firing 25 to 30,000 rounds a day, you go through a year's production of artillery in a month.
Yeah.
And then there's nothing left because we haven't geared up. The Russians already knew they have high expenditure rates. They're banging out 40, 60,000 rounds a day. They can do that forever. So again, the Russians are getting stronger and the Ukrainians and NATO are getting weaker. And anybody who thinks that this doesn't end in a decisive Russian victory, again, I'd like to know what you're smoking or drinking because I want some of that, man.